My dad works in a big park, and even when he wasn't working, he enjoyed taking me on trips into the wild. We visited many national parks, but I want to tell you about a weird thing that happened on a camping trip in the summer. We planned to stay in the wilderness for about 4 days, and it was summer vacation. So many places were crowded, but my dad, being a park ranger, knew of a quiet spot. I was excited about it. Back then, I was doing fine in school, but I wasn't sure what I really wanted. At that time, I thought I would join the military, but it didn't happen for a few reasons. Because of this, my dad thought it would be a good idea to take me into the woods to get used to being outside. It made a lot of sense, and obviously, you spend time camping if you're in the military, so we thought it was a pretty good idea. I had some summer school stuff coming up, and I really didn't want to do it. I don't know, summer school never made sense to me. I think when you're on summer vacation, you should just enjoy it, and not have to do more things in between. I believe summer should be a time to rest and relax, but my mom didn't agree. Once again, my dad understood, so he happily took me on a fun trip. We had a bunch of things planned for this trip. On the first day, we went for a nice hike to enjoy the views. We had all our camping gear with us in some old military rucksack things, with my dad carrying the most. During the first day, we saw a couple of people around, but I realized that the further we went, the fewer they became. This was good for me because I wanted to be away from people a bit. It was a really nice experience, and I enjoyed spending time with my dad. As it got closer to nighttime, we decided to try some fishing in the dark. I hadn't done it before, so I was pretty excited. Finally, we reached the campground my dad chose, and I was happy to be there, ready to settle in. My dad shows me where we can fish, sets everything up, and gives me a headlamp. While this is happening, I haven't really fished before, so I'm pretty much clueless about how I'm supposed to do this. Every 5 minutes that I haven't caught anything, I've put my headlamp closer to the water, looking for the fish, obviously scaring them off. I keep moving my fishing reel around, thinking it will help, but it probably just scares the fish away. I don't know. I was more worried about hurting my hand on the fishing reel. My dad seemed to be gone for quite a while, but it doesn't bother me much because I'm too focused on trying to fish. While fishing, I hear some water disturbance. It's not close, but I definitely notice it. I raise my head, trying to shine my lamp towards it, but obviously, I can't see that far. The torch isn't that powerful. Now, I can just about make out the silhouette of something in the water before it disappears down again. And I think, wow, that must have been a really big fish. Now, something weird happened while I was fishing. Out of the corner of my eye, I noticed a plant move, like someone touched it. Again, there's no one around but me and my dad, and I know it's not him. So, I feel a bit uneasy about it. I try to convince myself it might be some kind of animal, so I don't think too much about it. I try to cast my fishing reel as far as I can. I manage to do it, and my dad finally comes over saying, "Godson, you know you almost hit me with that. You have to be careful." He shows me how to do it the right way. My dad is actually fishing properly. We didn't catch anything in the end, but he tells me not to shine the light down because it scares the fish, and you should try to stay still. I tell him I'm pretty sure there was a big fish causing ripples in the water farther up, but he says the fish shouldn't be big enough to do that. I mentioned it looked like a person, but I think my dad doesn't really believe me. Now it starts to get really cold, so we go back to our campsite and get ready for the night. It's a nice night. My dad was reading a book, and I wasn't sure what to do, so I started drawing some things. I used to do it a lot when I was younger, but I don't draw much now. However, I'm pretty good at cartoon sketches for some reason. I used to draw characters like The Simpsons and SpongeBob, so I guess that's why I have a knack for it. My dad was pretty impressed with my drawings. I just drew some pictures of the forest and tried to draw what I saw in the water earlier. Not the actual thing, but the way the water moved and the plant shaking. It felt like the right thing to do at the time, and that was it. We eventually fell asleep and woke up for the next day. Now, on the second day, We weren't actually leaving this spot, and we were just going to do some more hiking around. My dad took me to a place, and my goodness, it had a beautiful view there. Everything looked so clean and beautiful, and at that moment, it stuck in my mind that I wanted to be in the military. I thought, well, I'll get to see things like this all the time, and I was really excited about it. My grandfather and his grandfather were in the military, so I thought it would be good to do the same. Finally, this day ends, and not much happened. The next morning, we pack up and get ready to go to the last part, the last campsite, the bird one. The hike to get there wasn't too hard, and again, I was happy to be out there. I don't know why, I just felt good the whole time, and it was a lovely experience. Now we reach the campground, settle in for the night, and this is when things get a bit strange. I'm awakened by the sight of someone outside the tent. I can just about see the silhouette. I say, "Dad," and then realize he's not there. I quickly unzip the tent and see my dad holding a hunting knife and a torch, pointing it at someone. I say, "Dad." He tells me to stay still, son. My dad yells at somebody to go back now. Because it's so bright, and I've just come out of the dark tent, my eyes haven't adjusted. But I quickly grab my headlamp and turn it on. I can see somebody covered in blood, holding a knife, just staring at me and my dad. Now, what happened next was really crazy. He turns around, throws himself into a tree, then gets up again and repeats the process. He stares at us for probably 10 seconds before going up to the exact same tree near our campsite, throwing himself at it, then coming back again. I realize that he's dropped a knife and constantly picks it up, and he hasn't cut himself. The blood and stuff are just from the tree, but what on earth is he doing? This goes on for a good 10 minutes before my dad tells me to start packing up everything. I quickly do so, and I didn't feel too scared in this moment, because having my dad there with his knife made me feel like the safest person in the world. Now, we finally gather all our stuff, and I kid you not, the whole time, this guy was constantly doing the same thing over and over again. I've never seen anything like it, and even to this day, I haven't. We finally get our stuff together, and my dad tells me to hold his hand and lead the way back. Now, this is a big responsibility at the time because I haven't really been camping like this before, and I'm not sure I know the way back. Well, my dad tells me that he's not going to look back until this guy is out of sight. I do keep looking back, and my dad tells me not to because he can see when I'm doing it because of the light, and he knows how scared I can get sometimes. But I asked my dad what's happening, and he said that the guy's constantly doing the same thing over and over again, until eventually, we're at a point where my dad can take over and tells me to do the same. My dad's walking incredibly fast, and eventually we get back into the car and drive home. Now, it turns out, and I only learned this after my dad told me a few years later, the police found that guy there. Apparently, he had stabbed somebody and then taken some kind of mushroom that gives you a repetitive motion syndrome. And that's why he was throwing himself at the tree. Apparently, he was completely out of his mind, but they managed to capture him. Now, if it wasn't for that mushroom making him repeat his motions, he could have easily come closer to us and probably just stabbed us in our tent. But thank God he didn't. I work as a child care professional, and one of the kids I look after has recently developed an interest in hiking. I decided to take him on a hike along a fascinating trail in Salt Falls State Park. We parked near the beginning of the trailhead, all set to hike to Hoss Cave. The entire trail was about half a mile, which is why I chose it for our hike that day. There were lots of people, and it's a well-liked place, which makes me feel safe. But this summer, we had 7 big storms that caused a lot of damage to the trail. To my surprise, it was now harder to finish because it was emptier than usual. I didn't mind that the trail was really empty, because there was a small construction crew working on a bridge that I could just barely see from where we were. The kid was still excited about the hike. Even though the whole trail was damaged, it became only about a foot wide, and there was a drop of 6 to 12 feet down into a creek bed. Next, there's a big rock and lots of trees for many miles. The kid is super athletic, and I trust he can handle it. He was really excited about our adventure. We reached a platform where you can see the whole cave, even though there were many trees around and it was closed. But since we made it this far, we decided to go around the platform and go a bit into the cave, a few hundred feet in. We stayed in this place the longest because it was a bit tough, so I remember it well. There were tree roots right under the platform, and you could climb down on either side of them. Also, the cave looks more like a cliff, with a rock hanging over and a small stream right in the middle. It's not a scary tight cave, it's wide and lovely. We reached the cave, and I saw a candle that wasn't burning anymore, but it had been on a big rock, and there was a heart carved into it. I thought maybe someone had a date or something, so I didn't pay much attention. The kid wanted to climb to the top, and that's when I saw 2 more candles and 3 piles of small rocks stacked up by someone. It started to feel strange, but then he found a little puddle with baby salamanders and wanted to catch them. He was so happy, the happiest I've seen him in a long time, and I couldn't bring myself to say we had to leave. We spent about an hour catching baby salamanders, and I watched him have a blast. We decided it was time to go. When we reached the platform, right in the middle of the tree roots, there was a wet washcloth hanging there, and it definitely wasn't there before. He saw it too, but didn't realize how serious the situation was. In that moment, I knew 2 things. First, someone might be watching us, and we didn't spot them. Second, they could be hiding in the woods, intentionally not wanting to be seen, but leaving something for us to notice. The trail was too narrow to run back, and I didn't want to tell him we might be in danger. I just told him to walk ahead of me. I kept cheering him on, saying we're doing great repeatedly, and that made him walk faster. I didn't see anyone until we were on the trail. As we were leaving the park, a really dirty man came out of the woods and just stared at me with no expression on his face. That man kept staring at me until I couldn't see him anymore, like a stare from a scary movie. Now, I understood the third thing. He purposely wanted us to notice him, and that's the part that scares me the most. That stare stayed in my mind for days, and it bothered me for weeks, making me anxious. I even thought about canceling our plans after that. But I tried to convince myself that maybe we interrupted his bath time, and he didn't want to surprise us. Perhaps he was just there, watching us catch salamanders, waiting to go. But I can't understand why he stared at me like that and wouldn't move. I have a feeling it was probably on purpose, to scare us or something. You wouldn't believe how scared Tom, my boyfriend, was. He talks about it often as a really good experience, but for me, it wasn't good at all. It left me feeling very disturbed. In 2020, me and my mom, she's in her 60s, and I'm in my 30s, planned a camping trip for one night on the Oregon coast. I found a nice campsite on a camping app, and we went there. When we arrived, we noticed the campsite was close to the highway, but there were trees and a fence that blocked the view, so it wasn't too bad. It was mostly surrounded by a fence and tall fir trees. It's a nice campsite, and my mom loved how pretty it was. I felt a bit scared as soon as we stepped onto the property, but we arrived late, and I didn't think we could find another spot quickly. We made a nice campfire and had some hot chocolate while we watched the fire. I kept an eye out and didn't notice anything strange. If I remember correctly, my mom went to bed before me. I stayed up, watching the fire for a long time, before finally going to bed, very tired. It's around 2 a.m. I woke up to twigs snapping and a sound like someone dragging their fingers on the side of the tent, up by the front. I sat up, grabbed my phone, and the only thing I could use as a weapon, a flashlight. I unzipped my sleeping bag, just in case I needed to fight anyone. There was a full moon that night, and I couldn't tell if it was a person's shadow on the tent, or if a tree branch shadow was moving from the wind. It seemed like 2 people were outside, trying really hard to be quiet. We brought our books and boots inside, and there was no sign of anyone being out there. It felt like they were checking out the tent I was in, while also trying to hear if someone was inside. I made sure to make some noise so they knew someone inside was aware, but not too much noise. If they knew someone is awake, they can't surprise us, but they also don't know who is inside, or if we have guns. I sat in the dark until morning. My mom slept through it all. When we got up and out of the tent, little things had been moved. Our camp chairs with cup holders were there, but one cup had been in the holder and it was on the ground. My mom talked happily about how well she slept and how nice it was to camp there, so I didn't want to ruin her happiness or make her scared. We packed up, and I didn't tell her. I let her keep a good memory of peaceful sleep and relaxation on that beautiful property. Was it someone living in the woods, or maybe someone walking down the highway in the middle of the night, or who knows who? My mom had a great time, and I got a refund, but now I'm scared of camping. The owner said they might put up cameras now to watch things in the future. It's the people out there that really scare me now. I don't like how they acted so sneaky, trying their best not to be heard. That's what creeps me out.